Hello everybody and welcome to the Great Guild Wars 2 Countdown. There are only 15 or 12 days remaining until the launch of Guild Wars 2. The footage in the background comes from Mantis, so thank you very much to them, and you can find a link in the description down below if you want to check out more of their stuff. They have 3 Guild Wars 2 videos and some videos about other games, so be sure to check it out. So yesterday we had that stress test and the video went out just as the test was ending. I thought it started at 8, not at 7, so I missed the entire thing sadly, but everyone did say apparently it went really smoothly. There weren't any issues at all. Nobody really had any disconnect problems. Nobody had much lag. There wasn't as much rubber banding as the previous stress test. Just seemed like everything was really smooth and nice, and it only lasted an hour, so I kind of feel like this could be it for a stress test. They did a 1 hour one. Am I expecting them to go up to another one? I hope they do another stress test, because there's something I wanted to show you guys, but we'll see what happens. That was certainly a good stress test, so I hear, and I am very much glad to hear it. In the news kind of stuff, there isn't really much news. I did learn something pretty cool though. There was a video I watched, I believe it was Beta Weekend Event 3, it must have been, where some guys put out a cool video where they went to the bottom of Ratasum, so you know the giant cube. They actually jumped off the side of the cube and fell all the way down it. If you fall in the right way, you won't get caught on like any of the crevices or anything along the side, and then you can actually fall off the cube onto the ground below. And what's cool about this is when you're down there, you get defeated, but if you bought that item in the cash shop that allows you to resurrect anywhere in PvE, you could use this resurrection orb and then be alive in Ratasum underneath the cube, which is really quite cool. And what that meant was you could explore some places ArenaNet didn't really want you to go. For some of those surrogates that were around in Ratasum were locked off to us, in particular the one that led to the Polymock Arena. And they put out a video where they like ran around and they actually went to the arena in its unfinished, like super buggy state, but you could go there and you could walk around in there, and even the surrogate on the other side worked, and it was just kind of cool. They actually sent me a message today, and that alone was quite cool, but they actually sent me a message today saying that they tried to do it in more recent stress tests, and because ArenaNet found out people were getting down there, now apparently if you go there you're immediately teleported away and you're put into the bottom of Ratasum. And you might have seen at the bottom of Ratasum, inside the actual places you're supposed to go to, there's a prison. There's loads of cells in there with people being held captive, and apparently if you try and go there in the more recent stress tests and stuff, ArenaNet will just teleport you into those prison cells where you can't get back out. Obviously you can waypoint, but you'll be stuck in there, and other players will be able to come along and see you in there and laugh and wonder how you got in, which I think is really, really cool. There is no video or footage of them actually being stuck in the cell, but I will link in the description down below them getting to the Polymock Arena in the first place, which is quite cool nonetheless. Also, a couple of questions that I've been getting a lot of, not necessarily the most fascinating answers though in my opinion, which is why I've been ignoring them, but they have been coming in a lot. I suppose because launch is coming closer, this one's coming up so much more because people are worried about their computers not being able to run the game. Everyone keeps asking me what my specs are, what my PC is. It's not actually that great. I'm running one GTX 470 and my processor is an i7 860 clocked to I think about 3.4 gigahertz. So it's a reasonable system. The CPU is probably the better component of it, and that's probably why you're seeing me get reasonable performance in Guild Wars 2 as it stands, because as far as I am aware, and don't cut my head off here, but I'm pretty sure that when things are poorly optimized, they draw a lot more from the CPU typically than they will of the GPU. So in these early stages you might have a fantastic graphics card, but if your CPU is kind of rubbish, then you'll be getting terrible performance. It just so happens my CPU is not too bad, so it's kind of working me through it even if the GPU isn't being fully used at the moment. So those are my specs. They're not actually that amazing, but then again I do get a lot of questions of people saying, oh, here's my specs, so how will Guild Wars 2 run? I don't know, because I don't have a million systems all of different specifications that I play the game on, and then I can actually judge how it will run. I really can't answer most of those questions, but those are my specs. You'll probably be able to find them on my channel page from now on, and I don't know, just good luck to you. If you don't think your system's that good and you're unsure about getting the game, good luck if you do go for it. But I would caution people, this is a 2012 game, so if you are still on your 2008 rig, don't expect that it's ArenaNet's responsibility to optimize it and optimize it and optimize it until it will run on your system. There is a point where you're going to have to ask yourself, is my system just too old? Do remember this is a 2012 game, and with that comes certain expectations of the kind of systems we should realistically be expecting this thing to run on. So do bear that in mind. Another question that I get an awful lot of, totally different topic really, is whether there's any lore on the professions, in particular the professions that we can no longer play as, where they've gone, why they have left. This is a question that's been around for a very long time, since like when The Guardian first came out. Some of those original questions to the devs in interviews were, oh hey, what happened to the monk then? If this is replacing to the monk, what happened to them? They've never really come out with much strong lore on this regard. There's no specific story about the last monk that existed in Tyria and his woes and his travels as he's trying to teach people to become a monk like he once was. But nobody wants to listen. They want to be slightly more offensive as the Guardian. There's no specific lore like this. It's basically just they died out. They're just not around so much. There's certain things that they said. For example, when the Thief was announced, the Assassin was essentially the Guild Wars 1 counterpart to the Thief. But the main problem with the Assassin, with its name and so forth, was that it was very much steeped in Cantha. It was a very Canthan profession. It was all to do with them. And the similar problem occurred for the Ritualist, for the Dervish, and for the Paragon. These classes were very much steeped within the culture and the history of the region where they were first made available to us, whether that would be Alona or whether that be Cantha. Because this is so distinctly Canthan, the Assassin, and because the Thief was relatively different in terms of mechanics, they decided to get rid of all that semantic loading that is there on the Assassin left over from the Guild Wars 1 meaning of the word. They just decided to rename it to the Thief. But in lore, I guess the idea is that, you know, Cantha's been cut off for a long time, and people just, even in the real world, people develop different names for the same things as time goes by. That's a totally normal thing to happen. You have to consider that a lot of it is these are just evolutions of the previous classes, now with a different name. It's not that a certain class has totally disappeared, and I'm sure that ArenaNet are open to the idea that at some point in the in-game world, maybe not at launch, maybe in a later area, we will come across someone who is named a monk, or we will come across someone who is named a dervish and is actually practicing this, that is actually doing all the old dervish stuff we saw in Guild Wars 1. They could do that. In fact, we're already seeing something along those lines with the Ascalon Catacombs, where all of those ghosts there are ghosts of 200-ish years ago, or 220 years ago, I want to say, about there, when the faux fire happened. They're all ghosts from back then, and of course, back then, it was the profession structure we're familiar with in Guild Wars 1, and in there you will find just typical monks and stuff, and so they are doing this kind of thing. They've not totally disappeared. They're just not being practiced anymore. It's a question, it's such a vague answer, because it's just, you know, they've just changed. There's no specific story, so I get this a lot, though, and the devs have had this a lot as well, and it's still coming, so that's kind of your answer, guys. Sorry to say it, there's not much more there. Also, another thing, so for the first proper question, sort of, I guess, this one comes from Rylair679, who says, in Guild Wars 2, the PvP feels rather pointless. Sure, you get cool looking gear that does absolutely nothing for your character, blah, 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 blah. This was the question from yesterday. I was a bit of a dick to this guy, and a few people actually said in the comments that maybe I got the question wrong. I think you're probably right, so to give him the benefit of the doubt, I think what the question could be saying, is probably saying, to be honest, is when he says it's just for fun, he's talking about from in-universe. So the question is, why are we participating in PvP? Why are we fighting one another? What is my reason for as a blue team member to be fighting you as a red team member? Is it just because we as characters in the universe are having fun, or is it because this somehow ties back into the threat of the Elder Dragons? I think that's probably what you were trying to ask, and I'm very sorry for being a bit of a dick for taking the question in the wrong way. That's totally my fault. There isn't really much of a reason. Basically asking about the lore of PvP, it's very separate mechanically, and they've kind of made it rather separate in story terms too. This applies to world versus world as well as competitive PvP. They take place in the Mists, so this is kind of very far flung and very distant from the troubles of Tyria and the stuff going on with the Elder Dragons. There isn't much lore as to why we are fighting red versus blue. There isn't much lore about these three teams in world versus world. I've answered this quite recently on Daily. They just talk about this fight in the Mists, and that's kind of what's going on. In Guild Wars 1, they were quite good actually at giving a lot of lore as to why we were fighting in PvP. We had this whole region on the world called the Battle Isles that an entire group of people, the Zaishan, were watching over, and it was all a means of worshipping Balthazar and showing him that we were strong and we would fight one another and to please him, and that was all very, very good, and it was very solid in the story and in the lore. Doesn't seem to be much in Guild Wars 2. You're right. Is it just for fun? I guess so. On some level, it probably is. It's just us going to the Mists and deciding we want to fight one another and hone our skills, I guess. I mean, even Guild Wars 1, when you came to Guild versus Guild, there was this vague idea that you were assaulting someone else's island or someone else's guild hall, and it was somehow working through that. But Guild Wars 2, they have put a lot less effort into it, really. Does that matter, though? I guess not so much, because there is very much this idea that the people playing PvP don't really expect a really strong story or justification for why they're doing PvP. This extends just beyond MMOs. You know, we don't necessarily need that in any game. Why are we doing PvP? Why is this happening? It's usually separate from the campaign, and this is kind of the same thing that they're doing here. It would be nice to have that extra justification, and maybe in time ArenaNet will add hints and stuff that kind of explain why we're doing this. Why are we in World versus World? There might even be little hints and nuggets out there right now that I don't know about. But in general, it's not something that they've really written much about, and at the same time, I don't think it's much that the PvPers themselves care to look for, really. I mean, it's a smaller chunk of the community that are super into the lore, but also super hardcore PvPers, let's be honest here. That is a smaller demographic, so maybe they're just not writing for those people. I would be remiss to not mention that the PvP is taking place in the mists, and the idea of the mists is that they are resonating or replicating significant events of the worlds around them in the past. So when you're actually in PvP, well, you're on these maps and stuff, like you will be participating in the Battle of Kylo, which is a real event in lore, a real fight that was waged between two people. So in that regard, you can say, right, this is why this fight's going on. It's because of this fight during the Guild Wars, and that's totally fine. But the actual characters themselves, their motivations for deliberately going to the mist to go and fight and participate in these things when they weren't originally a part of these sieges, that's the bit that's shady and doesn't have much lore written about it, and that ArenaNet haven't really addressed. Why are you as a Char so compelled to go back and fight at the Battle of Kylo, which was just between humans and their own squabbles in your homeland? Why do you really care? I mean, and that's with a Char. Why would an Asura care? It's, you know, there's not any motivation in that regard. So the fights themselves do have lore about them, and they are over specific things, but why we the characters care? Are we just doing it for fun? Maybe we are. And like I say, I'm a bit more forgiving to ArenaNet for that, because so many other games do it. And in a weird way, you know, that might sound a bit bad, but I always kind of raise my eyebrows when a new game comes out, and their massive revolutionary thing that they talk about is, oh, we actually have a reason for participating in the PvP. There have been games that come out like this, like Brink and stuff, that decide they're going to do this whole angle, and, oh, there's a real reason to be fighting here. And to me, that never actually adds much to the gameplay or much meaning, and I don't really care if there's a crappy cutscene at the start or the end. At the end of the day, the PvP will make it good is the mechanics and all of that side of stuff, not the story that's just layered over the top as an excuse for why we're there. So I don't mind so much that ArenaNet haven't written that in. But yeah, so that's that question revisited, and I'm sorry about yesterday if I took your question the wrong way. The next question is from YouTube Censor, who says, "Greetings WP, these are my thoughts on jumping puzzles. The problem with these vast places are that they eat up quite an unnecessary batch of resources, such as FPS, hard drive space, and the dev's time, which could be used for more important agendas. Okay, they're eye candy and filled with jump puzzles, but once you've done one, you won't ever go back. And when they're all done, that's what? 80% of the map sitting on your hard drive. If ArenaNet want to prevent this, they should make the spots dynamic, randomizing a spawn of loot at each puzzle's end. For example, when WoW released PvP gear, it gave the opportunity to farm BGs and even level there without exploring. The world turned into a ghost world and the PvP servers lost their purpose. I capped without even exploring 10 years ago. WoW had me using all 15GB of its content. 10 months ago, WoW had me using only 1 gig of its content, with 3 expansions wasting 30. So I think you're making a couple of leaps here. I understand the idea that it's a waste to create stuff that players will never go back to, and I would just start by straight away saying that if any game can get away or have a justification of having an area that we're never going to return to, it's probably Guild Wars 2, because this game has made more pushes than any other MMO to encourage players to go back to early game areas and give them a reason to go back to earlier game areas and still experience fun content and rewards appropriate for them. So out of all MMOs, Guild Wars 2 is going to be most open to us. Out of any of the other ones, everywhere is going to be viable and available to us. So straight away, just because so much of that is now open, I'm a bit more forgiving if ArenaNet do develop an area that we'll never see again. For example, when you first create your character and you're in your little tutorial area where you get to see, for example, Queensdale while it's storming and everything's in a very specific way and there's all of the villagers hiding and stuff, you're never going to see that again, but I don't mind that so much. And the same can be said for all of the personal story, really. Once you've completed it, you're not going back to it unless you go to help out a friend. So I can forgive this. I totally can if they have certain areas, but even that is making a few jumps here that I feel like are maybe a bit unjustified. Eating up resources such as your FPS and hard drive space, well, for FPS, that's immediately just assuming they're making these ridiculous looking places. Like Specs Lab was very, very beautiful and really good looking, but even though I didn't experience a significant drop in FPS, I don't think I noticed a single single drop in FPS while I was there. Some people might though, and I concede to that. So when they are creating walled off sections like this, then what you're saying about it filling up your hard drive or it just being unnecessary files that you're never going to go back to, as well as introducing low performance in these areas, then maybe that's true. But what you've got to focus on is that most of the jumping puzzles, in truth, are just in the general exploring areas that players will be seeing through other means anyway. Look at the Wall Breach Blitz, look at the Greenwich Gamble, look at Morgan's Spiral. They're all actually out in normal areas, and the views you get at the end of these jumping puzzles are just views across normal places of the game. You're just looking at it from much higher up, so it looks far more impressive. They've not actually put much in the way of wasted resources there, stuff people are going to be seeing anyway. So again, I feel like it's not actually a big problem. There are a fair few that take place in their own sealed caves and encounters and stuff, but even then, you know, you have a lot of fun the first time you play through those. Can you really say it's wasted? Once you've completed it the first time, then you can say, right, well, I don't need to be accessing that content anymore and the files don't need to be there. But you have experienced that fun, and that has built up a memory of you playing Guild Wars 2 and added to your experience of the game. So it's not really wasted. I mean, what is your opinion then of single player games that are just one long story and you can never go back to earlier areas? Is that entire game wasted? Do you only want that very last pocket of entertainment you get at the end when the game opens up to you a bit and you're waiting before the final boss? Is that really a healthy way to look at the development of the game? I don't agree. I don't think it's wasted at all, and I don't have a problem with them putting these sealed off areas. Having said all of that, I do agree with the idea that there should be more reason to go back through these jumping puzzles. We talked on a previous daily about the idea of adding some kind of timer, making it competitive in some way. Maybe you wouldn't even have to go that far. There's already some level of people being encouraged to go back through these, and that's when they're helping their friends out. If you look at all of the content in Guild Wars 2, jumping puzzles are one of the most cooperative things you can do. These are one of those areas where you really will be helping your friends because you have that knowledge on how to continue and how to get to the next area, what the next jump is, and you can actually impart that upon your friends. So this is one type of content that, despite the fact you personally might not have that much incentive as it currently stands to return to, it's also one of those bits of content you've got more incentive to go help your friends return to, because you can offer them valuable information that they might find quite difficult to work out on their own. While if you look at events and meta events and stuff, it's always quite clearly telegraphed exactly what people need to do, and the extent of you aiding them is really just comes down to how you can help them in combat, and even that is diminished somewhat when you consider that the combat will just scale when you get there anyway. So I mean, I feel like jumping puzzles are okay at the moment. I'm not screaming for all of these reasons for something else to encourage us to return to them after we've already completed them, but some kind of system that worked on the chests that maybe encouraged us to reopen it, you know, once a week or something would be quite cool. I'm not opposed to the idea of having some kind of super rare collection of items that drop from the chests at the end of jumping puzzles that you can continue to go back to the chest every now and then to have another shot at getting this item, that maybe once you've got the full collection from all of the jumping puzzles you get some piece of equipment or something. I think that would be a good idea, something nice, something cosmetic to encourage people to return to. But then again, ArenaNet are avoiding doing rare drops and stuff like that because sometimes that encourages frustrating gameplay. So whether that's on their agenda or whether they'll leave them as it is, I don't know, but I wouldn't be too bummed out if they did leave it as is. I really wouldn't. Anyway, there you go guys, that's the Great Guild Wars 2 countdown for today. Thank you very much for watching, and I will see you tomorrow for another day closer to the launch of Guild Wars 2. We're not even, if you pre-purchase, just consider this for a second, you're not even in the teens anymore. You're now down to 12 days, less than 2 weeks. Think about what you'll be doing in a fortnight's time. I'll see you next time, everyone.